In everyone's life, situations can arise where a loved one begins to act distant, as if wanting to punish you for some unknown transgression. Some individuals avoid open conflicts, preferring to use subtle, almost imperceptible methods to inflict pain and make you pay for crossing an invisible boundary known only to them. They turn their outward calm into a psychological battlefield, where every gesture and word has a hidden meaning. In the world of emotional manipulation, narcissists do not resort to shouting and insults. Their most effective tools are those that go unnoticed, leave no visible traces, but inflict deep wounds. When a narcissist feels hurt, ignored, or exposed, they do not react impulsively. Instead, they develop a plan, observe, and wait for the right moment to make their victim doubt themselves, feel guilty, and begin to question their own adequacy. The narcissist does not seek justice. Their goal is revenge, but not the ordinary kind. They crave a quiet, almost graceful revenge, disguised as indifference, which causes the victim to lose control of the situation, not understanding the reason for what is happening. It is a revenge that plays with emotions, leaving no evidence. It is in this area that the darkest tactics of the narcissist unfold. They do not need to raise their voice to destabilize their victim. It is enough to sow tiny doubts, make them feel invisible, and manipulate others so that they begin to see the victim in a distorted light. This is a quiet, exhausting, and confusing power play that gradually drains life force. When it comes to the narcissist's revenge, the imagination often paints pictures of stormy clashes and stinging squabbles, but the true essence of this phenomenon is much more insidious. The real power of a narcissist lies in their ability to strike from the shadows, so that it is difficult to catch the moment of attack. They are able to wound without resorting to physical contact, and create a sense of isolation even in close proximity. Their favorite trick is to make the victim doubt their own adequacy, the accuracy of memories, and the sharpness of intuition, all veiled in a mask of benevolence or, conversely, performed with an impenetrable look. It all starts with a deceptive lull. After a conflict or even a minor disagreement, the narcissist prefers to retreat into the shadows, not out of a desire for peace, but to develop a cunning strategy. Their goal is to heal their wounded pride, and for this, they will not engage in open confrontation. Instead, they begin to implement a carefully thought-out plan, which is gradually embodied in barely noticeable gestures, vague hints, meaningful pauses, and actions that seem innocent but pursue a specific goal: to make you pay. For example, a narcissist may suddenly stop responding to your messages without resorting to blocking or insults, but simply disappear from sight, as if you never existed. However, this is not a spontaneous decision, but a carefully planned act of retaliation. They deliberately create a vacuum to manipulate your feelings. They know that you care about the situation, that you crave an answer or explanation, and deliberately deny you this, because it is in silence that their power lies, and you are deprived of the opportunity to influence what is happening. When they deign to return, they will do so not for reconciliation, but to make sure that you are still in their emotional power and remain a prisoner of their web. They are like an actor playing the role of equanimity, as if there was no gaping wound that they inflicted on your heart. And as soon as you mention it, they immediately turn into a sufferer, accusing you of excessive dramatization, of not understanding their delicate soul. And so, the vicious circle closes again. A narcissist does not know how to forgive sincerely, and even if they pretend to have forgiven, it is only the calm before the storm. They patiently wait for the moment when you feel the same pain that they experienced, even if you had no intention of causing them suffering. Their excessive ego cannot bear even a shadow of doubt in their own greatness, the slightest feeling of inferiority or rejection. And in their perverse logic, they consider it necessary to restore the shaken balance, resorting to revenge, but not in the form of open aggression. No, they act with frightening coldness. Sometimes you do not even realize that you have become the object of their revenge. It seems to you that everything is going as usual, but gradually you begin to feel superfluous, humiliated, insecure. Subtle, sarcastic comments about your mistakes, constant comparisons with others, strategic forgetting about things that are important to you. All these are links in the same chain, the goal of which is to make you feel worthless. The most insidious thing is that these manipulations are not always perceived as direct attacks, because they are skillfully disguised to sow doubt in you, to make you blame yourself. That is the diabolical genius of the narcissist. They destroy you from the inside, making you believe in your own inadequacy. And when you, broken, emotionally collapse, they will perceive it as a triumph. After all, their goal is not just to hurt you, but to see you defeated, dependent, desperately in need of their approval. Often you can see how a person with narcissistic traits uses those around them as visual aids, presenting them in an unfavorable light to others. This is not done openly, but subtly, but noticeably enough for everyone to realize that there is something wrong with the victim. At the same time, the narcissist demonstrates false concern, as if sincerely caring about the well-being of the chosen person. However, there is poison hidden behind every word, and every gesture is aimed at sowing doubt in others, undermining trust in the victim. And while the victim tries to defend themselves, the narcissist skillfully positions themselves as a misunderstood and offended party. The narcissist also has other tricks in their arsenal. They can involve third parties in the conflict, creating situations that seem random and spontaneous. Suddenly, someone close to the victim begins to show coldness for no apparent reason. Intrigues are woven behind the victim's back. Distorted facts are spread, depriving them of the opportunity to justify themselves. This so-called triangulation is one of the narcissist's favorite forms of revenge, because it not only causes pain, but also isolates the victim. And in isolation, a person becomes more vulnerable and manageable. It all resembles a quiet psychological war. There are no loud explosions here, but the consequences are felt on self-esteem, relationships, and emotional stability. And when the victim tries to break free from these networks, the narcissist uses the last weapon, guilt. They make the victim feel responsible for their pain, reminding them of past favors and demonstrating imaginary wounds. All this is done only to keep the victim close, not to let them leave completely. After all, the narcissist does not want to see the victim happy without them. Even after the breakup, the narcissist strives to control the narrative of their former victim's life. This is their most cruel form of revenge, to make the victim continue to doubt themselves, to wonder if they made a mistake. These doubts haunt them even years later, in other relationships, even when it seems that everything is in the past. Realizing what is happening can cause a storm of emotions, from righteous anger and deep sadness to a painful sense of guilt for past blindness. But the key moment is precisely the present insight, which allows you to begin the path to healing and restoring personal boundaries. It is important to realize that no one has the right to manipulate your mind, trample on your feelings and dignity. The narcissistic personality, while maintaining external calm and sometimes demonstrating ostentatious gestures of sympathy, secretly keeps a meticulous record of every word, look, and action that is perceived as a challenge to their emotional superiority. For the narcissist, open conflicts and shouting are not necessary. The slightest deviation from the expected reaction, a manifestation of independence, or a refusal to recognize their special role is enough. Remember, have you ever felt punished for showing independence and making your own decisions? Share your stories, because in the narcissist's arsenal, revenge is not always scandalous. On the contrary, the more subtle and sophisticated the revenge, the more satisfaction it brings to the narcissist. It is a cold-blooded strategy aimed not at resolving the conflict, but at retaliating, often remaining unnoticed by the victim. Start the process of distancing not with loud statements, but with conscious absences full of inner intention. Stop behaving as before, moderate your participation, become less open, but so that you feel this transformation without being able to define it. It is a presence that weighs on you because it stops offering, not because of specific actions. And this uncertainty is exactly what is exhausting. At some point, you realize that you are acting cautiously, carefully choosing words, trying to anticipate the reaction, without even understanding what caused the discontent. Are you familiar with the feeling of punishment without awareness of guilt? How did you cope with this feeling of emotional disorientation, which, unfortunately, is more common than is generally believed? Many people live in such dynamics without realizing that they have become victims of a hidden strategy of retribution. Over time, you notice that their behavior is inconsistent. In public, they may be friendly, even say good things about you, while in private, they maintain a noticeable emotional distance. This duality is not accidental. It is part of the desire to control the perception of others. In the eyes of others, they remain a reasonable, mature, and understanding person. But seeing the other side, you start to feel lonely, even when you are near him. He isolates you emotionally, without resorting to words, and when you try to find out the reason, he denies everything. Everything is fine, he says. Or even worse, he ridicules your anxiety, as if you see something that is not there. At this stage, many begin to doubt the adequacy of their own perception, tormented by thoughts of excessive sensitivity or erroneous interpretation of events. However, this is exactly the distortion of reality that the narcissistic personality seeks to create, in order to deprive you of self-confidence and trust in your own intuition. After all, disconnecting from your inner compass, you find yourself in a state of emotional drift, which allows the narcissist to regain the central place in your life. Have you ever had to deal with systematic devaluation of your intuition by a loved one? Have you ever felt guilty for showing perfectly legitimate emotions? By sharing your experience, you can help other people recognize what they are also experiencing. But as soon as you begin to resist and question this dynamic, the narcissist moves on to the next stage of his manipulative game, victimization. He appears as a misunderstood sufferer who gives everything without receiving anything in return, a person wounded by your constant reproaches. With amazing skill, he shifts the focus of attention, so that in the end you begin to make excuses, even though it was you who was looking for explanations. This is one of the most effective techniques of the narcissist, to turn you from victim into aggressor, from victim into executioner. And all this is achieved with the help of carefully selected words and gestures, which only enhance his game of innocence. Sometimes the narcissist's need for control goes beyond direct interaction with you. He begins to subtly talk about you with your loved ones, using not direct accusations, but veiled anxiety. "I'm worried about how she has been behaving lately," he says, or, "It hurts me to see her like this, but I don't know how to help." Such phrases sow seeds of doubt and create a distorted view of you, without resorting to open accusations. Are you familiar with when someone did this to you, or to someone close to you? These subtle hints, although they seem insignificant, undermine your emotional reputation in the eyes of others. And when you seek support, you find that a certain prejudice has already formed against you. You don't know how it started, but you clearly feel it. The worst thing is that from the outside, it seems as if the narcissist is simply showing concern for you. This manipulation of the environment has a devastating effect. It leads to isolation, makes you doubt people who used to support you. And in this emotional isolation, the narcissist reappears as your only refuge. He offers you understanding, patience, and even forgiveness, as if you have made an unforgivable mistake. This is a vicious circle that slowly destroys your self-confidence and increases your dependence on the narcissist. How often have you had to apologize for actions you did not commit, or feel a crushing sense of guilt for striving for elementary clarity in a relationship? Sometimes, only by sharing our experiences, we realize the absurdity of the situation in which we found ourselves. At times, there is a deceptive feeling that everything is getting better. The narcissist again demonstrates signs of affection, resumes familiar rituals that bring comfort, becomes more open and accessible. However, behind this facade there is no sincere expression of love, but only a cunning technique of intermittent reinforcement designed to form emotional dependence. When, after periods of complete indifference, the narcissist bestows upon you crumbs of attention, the brain perceives this as a valuable reward. It works according to the same scheme as in slot machines. You never know when you will hit the jackpot. Thus, the narcissist keeps you on a short leash, forcing you to crave signs of attention and dream of the return of those good moments, which, alas, are never constant, but arise only when it is beneficial to him. While you are desperately trying to adapt to this unhealthy dynamic, the narcissist is carefully watching you, assessing your reactions and calculating what exactly throws you off balance and makes you compromise. He does not need to raise his voice or resort to direct pressure, because he has already taken possession of the key to your emotional sphere. You have so deeply internalized his presence that his judgments have become more important to you than your own. And this is one of the most sophisticated forms of revenge, to force you to abandon your true essence and turn into who he wants you to be, without resorting to open violence, but only skillfully building a complex emotional architecture. This hidden side of relationships isn't always obvious to outsiders, but those who have experienced it recognize it in every gesture, every ambiguous phrase, every subtle shift in the emotional climate. I invite you, dear readers, to share your stories in the comments. Have you ever felt confusion, isolation, or been the victim of emotional manipulation without understanding how it happened? Your experience could be a beacon of light for those who are still hesitant to acknowledge what's happening to them. When these insidious strategies succeed and the victim begins to succumb to emotional pressure, the narcissist doesn't stop their game. On the contrary, they intensify it, employing increasingly calculated moves designed to strip the victim of any ability to resist, all while avoiding open conflict. Their tactics are methodical and precise. Unlike ordinary people prone to impulsive reactions, they carefully weigh each step. Their goal isn't to appear as the aggressor, but to create the impression that they're merely reacting to your behavior. Thanks to their ability to invert roles, they skillfully disguise attack as defense, and you, without realizing it, begin to find excuses for their every action, perceiving them as a consequence of your own mistakes. One of the most sophisticated forms of perpetuating this vicious cycle is what could be called quiet emotional reconfiguration. Its essence lies not in direct insults or open criticism, but in gradually altering your perception of yourself through subtle gestures, attitudes, and comments that seem harmless at first glance. The narcissist creates a narrative in which you appear not good enough. They don't state this openly, but constantly hint at it. If you make a decision, they express skepticism. If you show enthusiasm, their reaction is lukewarm. If you achieve significant success, they diminish it, making subtle remarks that make you doubt your accomplishments. Thus, without raising their voice, they sow seeds of insecurity, and you, without realizing it, begin to need their approval more than your own internal validation. This type of gradual invalidation has devastating consequences, manifesting not instantly and not in the form of a resounding slap. It acts slowly, almost imperceptibly, but over time it undermines your ability to emotional self-defense. The victim, driven by an animal fear of public condemnation, desperately seeking to earn even a small measure of approval, frantically clings to fleeting threads of attachment, as if to a lifeline in the midst of the merciless emotional drought that the narcissists themselves created. It is at this moment that their power reaches its peak, because they no longer need to make any effort. The victim, enslaved by fear, becomes their own overseer, subjecting their own thoughts and actions to harsh censorship and ruthless correction. But even this is not the limit. Often the narcissist allows themselves the cynical luxury of introducing third parties into the relationship, not necessarily resorting to physical infidelity, but rather using them as a tool for constant comparison and humiliation. Suddenly, the name of a certain person begins to appear in their speech, whose virtues are ostentatiously praised, whose mind evokes great admiration, and whose character is given the most laudatory epithets. The true purpose of this praise is not to elevate the mentioned personality, but to sow seeds of doubt and feelings of deep inferiority in the victim's soul. This outside figure becomes a distorted mirror, reflecting only one's own inadequacy and insignificance. Triangulation is not an accident and not an innocent game, but a carefully planned maneuver aimed at destabilizing the victim's psyche while avoiding open confrontation. While the tormented soul is racked with doubt, trying to understand whether they are exaggerating what is happening, the narcissist watches their agonizing discomfort with diabolical satisfaction. At this critical moment, the victim is torn between the natural desire to resist what is happening and the paralyzing fear of finally breaking this connection. After all, the narcissist, subjecting them to the most severe punishments, simultaneously instills in them the idea of their own indispensability, convincing them that without their guidance they will be completely helpless and lost in this world. They skillfully create the image of the only, special, and irreplaceable person in their life. Their manner of speaking is distinguished by filigree precision, and even when their words hurt, there is a paradoxical feeling that closeness with them is preferable to loneliness. This is one of the most insidious traps, because it is not just about control, but about forming a deep emotional dependence based on the methodical destruction of your personality. Only pale shadows remain of the former you, barely discernible outlines of who you were before you were drawn into their orbit. At this stage, the mechanism of projection manifests itself with particular force. The narcissist, unable to cope with their destructive emotions, shifts them onto you as if they were your own experiences. If they are consumed by jealousy, they accuse you of being overly suspicious. If they lie, they point to you as the main deceiver. If they are cold, they reproach you for being distant. Each of their vices is reflected in you with astonishing naturalness, and they do it with such conviction that you ultimately begin to doubt yourself, wondering if you are the source of all the problems. This manipulative tactic not only relieves them of guilt, but also strengthens their moral superiority in the relationship. They appear as a person who remains calm, seeks compromises, and is condescending towards your alleged imbalance. You, looking into this distorted mirror, gradually lose touch with your true self. As this drama unfolds, they carefully protect their impeccable public image. They know how to appear charismatic, charming, and even modest in the eyes of others. Their ability to portray an understanding person is so convincing that if you decide to talk about what is happening, most likely no one will believe you. Or, even worse, you will be considered exaggerating, unfair to someone who seems like such a good person. This striking contrast between the narcissist's public image and the nightmarish reality in which you live only intensifies your sense of isolation. You not only feel misunderstood, but also silenced, because attempts to talk about what is happening turn into a humiliating experience. No one sees, no one believes, no one understands. In this state of emotional exhaustion, many begin to distance themselves from their own history, losing touch with reality. Victims of narcissistic abuse gradually lose touch with their true feelings, turn away from hobbies that brought joy, and become withdrawn. Previously, they were guided by an internal compass, but now their soul is tormented by endless doubts. And in this vacuum that has formed, the narcissist appears like a savior, offering seeming stability. But this is not genuine love, not a partnership based on mutual respect, and not freedom of self-expression, but only an emotional swamp where you are destined to play the role of adapting, enduring, and yielding. After all, the narcissist, with their frozen personality, sees no need for change. For them, the existing order of things is the pinnacle of perfection.